Okay, good afternoon. Welcome to another fun and hopefully life-changing experience here. My name is Robbie Paul. I'm the chair of the Management Information Systems Department here in the College of Business. Those of you that don't know me, and it is my honor, really, to welcome two of our amazing, illustrious MIS alumni, and my friends. I'll start with Dr. Graham here, Dr. Thomas Graham. It's interesting, let me back up 1 second and share the title of this session, which I think you'll see why. It says, Transitioning from the Dorm Room to the Boardroom. Do what you need to do so you can do what you want to do. And that's relevant, especially with regard to Dr. Graham here, is I have had the honor of literally watching him do that as he was our student back in the early 2000s. Came through the Introduction to MIS course and the MIS curriculum, and spent a lot of time in my office and other offices, and now he serves as the Chief Information Security Officer at CynergisTek, a top healthcare consulting firm offering cybersecurity, privacy, compliance, and IT audit services / managed services. Before that, he supported the Defense Health Agency, a variety of different roles. His qualifications, his credentials, his progress through the professional ranks is nothing less than amazing. That's the only word that comes to mind. I'll give you a brief sort of glimpse of what that means. In the first year that Dr. Graham, after he graduated from ECU with an MIS degree, his first year, he received multiple promotions, multiple raises, and had to struggle through trips to Italy, Hawaii, and one more place. I forget. It's such a tough life that he's lived, and especially as he graduated from here. But I've known him, as I said, ever since he came through my class way back, and it's just been great to see how well he's doing, and more importantly, for us, he loves to give back. That's why he's here. He loves to mentor and bring along our students who are interested, and he's done that in the past, so we're very grateful that he has joined us here again today. Then we have Mr. Maurice Moody. He currently serves as the head of transaction migration for the consumer business at Citizens Bank, a financial services company with over $200 billion in assets that operates 1,200 branches that span 14 states. In this position, he is responsible for setting the customer migration strategy from physical to digital assets, and for overseeing the design, development, risk management, execution for all components, driving $500 billion, that's with a B, in operational cost savings. I'm assuming a lot of you are MIS majors, and one of the things that MIS helps organizations with is operational cost savings. And this is one example, $500 billion worth. I love that he says his primary responsibilities include making banking simple. I love that, Maurice. Because as you'll know, and I think you'll agree, one of our jobs as MIS folks, professionals, is making other people's jobs simple and easy to do, and to do it well. He's got a 25-year banking career. Unfortunately, I did not have the pleasure of knowing him while he was in school here, but since then, again, just like Dr. Graham, Maurice has been one of our rock-solid supporters for the department, for the college, And ECU, always giving back. I cannot tell you, I wish I could tell you the schedules these gentlemen have this week. It is still blowing my mind. I'm saying that to say how grateful we are that they took time out of that schedule to be here with us. And so, welcome, and thank you for joining us. So we're going to do a little bit of a panel kind of question and answer format here, and we're going to share the mic. So, all right, so we'll start with, share with us, each of you, please, if you would, a bit of your MIS journey. So you can talk about, where you got your start, how did MIS help you get to where you are, how did MIS bridge the gap from understanding the business, communications, analysis, things that we talk about a lot. So whoever wants to go first.
All right, well, first of all, I want to say two things. One, at least when he introduced us, he didn't add the adjective infamous. That may be more appropriate in some regards, but also, Maurice, you got to up those numbers, man.
It's actually a typo. It's a half billion. When he read it out loud, it was 500 billion. I was like, whoa, it's a half a billion.
Oh!
It's a half billion I got to take out of the system by 2025. So I just wanted to get that corrected. Maybe I need to up the number.
I was just read that, man. I was just cool.
That was my typo.
Sorry.
So sorry about that.
All right, so as Dr. Paul mentioned, he first came to know me when I became a part of the program back in the early 2000s. Actually, we were the last class that graduated, I think, that still had decision sciences on our degree versus MIS. What he didn't tell you, and I am not this old, I actually started at ECU back in the 90s. I started as a physics major as a transfer student from another institution in Florida. And I come back. I actually happened into MIS, honestly, either by accident or on luck, however you want to look at it. There was a professor that used to be part of the department, Dr. J.D. Selby-Lewis. And I took her class, and we actually kind of bonded a little bit because at that point in time, I was working for Pizza Hut as an operations specialist. And she evidently did her Ph.D. dissertation work on Pizza Hut operations. So we started talking, and she said, do you realize that if you just took the classes, you learn the language that you need to speak in the business world, that you could graduate with a 4-year degree and almost 10 years of experience versus continuing my physics program and having a 4-year degree and maybe an internship or two. And I thought about it, and I was like, well, that makes sense. So I transitioned. I've become part of the MIS program. And honestly, I can't say enough about the professors. Some of them are still here, as Dr. Paul is still here. Some of them have gone on and retired or other situations. But really what MIS taught me was that in the business world, what they're looking for are people that understand information. And not only can you understand it, but can you translate it into actionable items. And I'm going to give you an example. So, as he mentioned, I work in cybersecurity. And you might think, well, what does cybersecurity have to do with a College of Business activity? Cybersecurity is a strategic advantage and strategic initiatives in many organizations currently throughout the world. And what MIS teaches you, and what Dr. Paul alluded to when he was opening up, is MIS teaches you how to understand data, how to understand information, interpret it, and then make valid business decisions. At the heart of cybersecurity, that's the same thing. It's interpreting the data, interpreting the information, and being able to help and make those strategic business decisions. The other thing that I can say about the MIS program, just to kind of get started, I'll give you the mic, Maurice.
Take your time, bro.
I mean, if you want me to take my time here, I'll say I don't think that. Ever since I've graduated, and especially early on in my career, these professors really still were there for me. If I had a question, they were still there. They helped me understand, some of the things that, honestly, I was probably still very naive in when I graduated. And even to this day, I still talk to them on a regular basis. I don't know if that's your experience, but here, I'll give it to you.
Hey, thank you so much. That's an awesome story. My journey is a little bit different. I'm just a little boy from eastern North Carolina, and you had a few options when you came out of Roanoke Rapids High School, which is down by Scotland Neck, Halifax County area. Either went to Duke, Chapel Hill, Carolina, East Carolina, and most of my friends, some of my older family had come here and matriculated through. A couple of relatives played football, so I always knew about East Carolina. And when I landed here, really didn't have a clue what I was going to do. One of my older cousins said, "You should go in marketing. IBM hires a lot of people in marketing, and you'll have a very steady, stable career." So I did that, and I went through undergraduate school. And coming out of undergraduate school, I didn't have a clue on what I was going to do. I wasn't prepared. My dad had come down here and gone to Pitt Community College, so he had 2-year training. But I was really the first in my family back when I came through to go on to get a 4-year degree. So it was kind of treading new waters for me. But what I really figured out when I got here, and I came here kind of maybe let's see how it works out, and I'll just go home and get a job at the mill if it doesn't work out right. And I was like, I don't think I'm going to go home and get a job at the mill. I got to make this thing work. So I got here and I met Dr. Westmoreland. He's retired now. We were somewhere up in this area. And I liked his charismatic personality. I began to study him and hang out with him and learn. And after I graduated, I came back to get an MBA. I took one MIS class in undergrad. And I was like, yeah, it's cool. I like Microsoft Access. But what am I going to do with it? But I go back. When I was in high school, my dad said, hey, you need to go on computers. And I was like, I hate computers. I don't even want to be around computers. He was like, no, that's what you need to do, son. And I'm grateful that he kind of got me going in that direction. I took that one class. Fast forward, I come to MBA school, and I get this. I'm sitting in my first team meeting, and everybody was from a different country, and me. Little old me from Roanoke Rapids, North Carolina. These people had, worldly views, well-traveled, and sounded like they had a little bit of money. I'm like, I don't know anything that they're talking about. I don't know Access. I don't know Excel. I don't know Word. And I can't put a PowerPoint together. And I called one of my buddies who worked at IBM. He shipped me a laptop. And I just became fascinated with the laptop and learning Microsoft Access. And I took another class, and it just became very, very intriguing. And fast forward, I graduated with MBA, not MIS. So I started working at BB&T, and I went through their commercial lending, now Truist, their commercial lending training program, and I came out as a commercial lender, right? And I knew I was going to loan operations, but they trained me to be a commercial lender. And they put me on this big design project to change out the branch network platform. So we had to modernize our branch platform. So I learned so much about front end. We called it GUI back then, graphical user interface. But the user experience, I learned all about the front, and I learned about the back end mainframe host systems. And I became so fascinated, I came back over here to get my master's certificate in MIS. And let me tell you, it has served me so well, because to Thomas's point, I'm able to go into a meeting today and I can sit with hardcore technicians with this whole thing around agile methodology and the way you deliver products to market, speed, agility, and quickness, and also just understanding big data and being able to synthesize that data down to value levers you can pull in the organization. What I learned here in the MIS program helped me out tremendously on my career trajectory. I mean, I can move throughout my career. I've moved in and out of operations, technology, not hardcore technology, in business roles. But the value I bring through the knowledge and the wisdom I got here at the MIS program really helps me to sit at the table with executives and say, yeah, I hear you saying you want to do it this quickly, but with all the sequencing and everything we need to do and connect all the dots, it's really this, and this is how you save money. So it's been, very, very helpful.
Thank you both. I think you all can see some patterns and trends developing, and I bet if we hear from more of our alumni, I think we will hear similar kind of trends. Okay, so would you now share some insight on some failures you've had? Interesting question, right? This is a leadership conference, and I think you'll see failures seem to be very closely aligned with leadership. So share some failures you've had and some lessons you've learned from those failures.
I love how you put me in front of the shooting gallery first every time conversation was like that.
Let's do the doctor respect.
All right, so first of all, I want to say the reason why he's asking a question about failures, and to kind of expand upon why he said that. There's a saying, and it was something that another former professor and former dean of the College of Business first imparted on me while I was a student here. It's that he learned more in his failures than he ever did in his successes. Don't be scared to fail. Everybody will, but most people are scared to fail. Failure just tells you a way that you can't do something, but you learn from it. You learn how to succeed by doing those things. So anyway, I guess the first time, or the first story I'll share with you was when I was a student here at ECU. I'm not sure where all of you guys are at in your student journey, but my story revolves around my capstone project for the MIS program. For those folks that aren't in the program, and at least back then, we had to design essentially a program for an actual business. We had to get the use cases from them, develop documentation, as well as develop the actual application. We were doing that. However, throughout that journey, it started out kind of rough. We actually had to fire somebody, if I remember correctly, off of our team, which, was the first time, at least in my student journey, I had to do something that impacted somebody else's experience at ECU. But we were getting ready to present. It was in the last week before presenting, 3 days before, actually. The entire application blew up in front of us. And when I say blew up in front of us, I took it to 5 professors in the MIS department, and none of you guys could figure out exactly what we had done. So, what did that mean? Well, one, at that point in time, we considered it a failure because now we were like, oh crap, are we going to graduate? But we could have went 2 ways. Either we could have crumbled or we could have said, okay, how do we get past this? And so with 3 days before we were supposed to present, finals going on, I told the rest of the team, I told my professors, look, I'm going to be in one of the study rooms over in Bate. I'll be there from about 8 a.m. till 4 a.m. in the afternoon, and we are rebuilding this thing from scratch. If you need me, that's where I'm at. I won't be in class. It's got to get done. So we sat there, and my teammates, I said, look, come help when you can. I understand you guys got other things going on, but we've got to get something so that we can present. And we got it about 90% back in 3 days. But the failure at that point in time that we learned from was you can be, 3 days out from when you have at that point in time probably one of the most important presentations in your life. And something can happen. And you can either crumble or you can say, okay, it's not working, let's get it to work and let's get it done. For my professional career, I'm going to share you a story, and I don't want to throw this in the trash, so I'll stop playing with it here in my pocket. But Dr. Paul mentioned that about a year after I graduated my undergrad, I was tasked with leading a team to Naples, Italy. We were there for about 4 weeks. It was my first lead. It was out of the country. When I found out about it, I went to my boss and I said, really? Really, you're going to send me halfway around the world the first time I'm leading the task? Okay, I see how you are. So anyway, we were over there, and about 2.5 weeks into the effort, we were helping the site basically correct some things that they were doing wrong. And it was in a hospital setting. And about 2.5 weeks in, all of a sudden, all of their systems stopped backing up to the back-end EHR database, which if you're not familiar, EHR stands for Electronic Health Record, and that's what allows doctors or different doctors to see what's going on for your medical history. So we were given a stop work order. Stop work basically in exactly what it sounds. We were sitting twiddling our thumbs at a table in Naples for several days. And we decided to try and help them figure out what was going on. So we did. We figured out what had happened. It was something that we had pushed out. And at that point in time, now everybody wanted to basically line me up and shoot me in successive order. However, even though this is a failure, one of the things that I learned from it is I never delete anything. The reason why I say that is that before we had pushed it out, we had actually explained what was going on and gained permission not only from the local site, but also the developer of the EHR program, who had both given us the okay to do it. And because I had done that, it saved my company a little over $100,000, which was the cost to basically get the site back in working order, because they had to fly a new team out. But the other thing that the failure taught me was just because somebody tells me it's okay to do something, understand what I'm doing first. You know, dig in. Don't just take something somebody tells me at face value. Understand what is going on, what the implications could potentially be, as well as, you know, what are the facts behind the case. And I don't know if you've been threatened to be strung up or put on a firing line or something, Maurice, but here you go.
Yeah, for me, I remember, and I'll just to make sure we stay on time here. When I was at BB&T, I moved out of the line of business into the project office. I wanted to get the project management experience and the capability maturity model thing, and was really big then. And you go over to India, you were 5. If you were in the States, you wanted to aspire to get to 3. So I was leading that effort for BB&T to kind of optimize their delivery model and how they deliver. All the same stuff you hear today, just repackaged in Agile. You go from waterfall to capability maturity model to Agile delivery. And I'll never forget, there was a guy named Dave Burris who gave me my first shot. And he said, hey, listen, I'm not going to measure you by how well you do when you're succeeding. I'm going to measure you by how you bounce back when you fail. And I just kind of went, I don't plan on failing. I'm pretty risk adverse and conservative in my approach, and I always, check and, look around the corner to see what's going on. But one particular night, David had this loan imaging system, and he was able to take cost out of the system by displacing people and putting them in other areas of the bank that needed more human capital, but he optimized his group, and he saved the bank a few $1 million a year by implementing this, at the time, revolutionary loan imaging system. So when the loan packages came out of the branching network, they shipped them down to Whiteville, North Carolina, indexed the loan documents, and then they came over I'm going to date myself, a T1 line for all the older people in here. They came across the system electronically to this group that would commercial loans upload to the mainframe. The consumer loans would auto upload to the mainframe, and they would just check the documents to make sure that the liens were perfected correctly, that there weren't any anything wrong with the documents. So one particular night, Vinny and I, this technician and I were supposed to upgrade one of the servers, and Vinny said, "Hey, I'm just gonna take out the SCSI cable, bring the server down, and it's only gonna take 10 minutes. We'll be back up and running in no time, right?" And it costs about $250,000 a day when the system is down. And I was like, "Oh, well, sure, go ahead and do it, Don." So, "Are you sure, Vinny?" Because Vinny worked for this guy that went to high school with my mom, so I felt like I had a pretty good relationship with Vinny. So this was at like 4 o'clock. At 9 o'clock, the system wasn't back up. So Vinny and I are at Chili's in Wilson, North Carolina, trying to figure out what are we going to do. Is something wrong here that's more pervasive than what we could have anticipated. And, oh, by the way, I didn't call Dave first and let him know I was taking the system down. So can we get it back up by 6 a.m. in the morning when people start coming in? We did get the system up. We couldn't figure out what it was then, but it was a virus in the actual system. It wasn't from the SCSI cable that we had to change out. It was really a virus just incubating in the software. It was a FileNet platform. So 2-3 days went by, and I'm just sitting at my desk wondering, what do I do? Do I own up to this? So I went to my manager and said, "Hey, listen, on the third day after, screwed up $750,000 in, I'm like, I made the call to pull that SCSI cable. Bad move, bad news. But the good news story is, Vinny has figured out the virus. If we fixed the virus, if we hadn't pulled that SCSI cable, it would have cost us probably $1.5 million. He was like, "Well, you go pitch that to Dave Burris." So I got encouraged. I called Dave, and I said, "Hey, David, you remember you told me you weren't going to measure me by my successes. You were going to measure me by my character when I failed." He said, "Yeah, I remember that." I said, "Well, listen, man, I need to own up to something. I was the one who made the call, and I should have went through process and protocol and checked with you and got clearance. I didn't. The learning for me is never do that again." And then I told him the good news story, and we laughed about it, and we got past it. But for me in that experience, kind of the same thing Thomas shared. I had to understand and ground myself and looking around the corner, not taking stuff at face value, understand what I'm getting into, how I manage my risk, and more importantly, how do I manage and mitigate the risk to the line of business and not cost the company any money.
Wow, great stories. Thank you, guys. And SCSI cables? My goodness, I haven't heard that in ages. So maybe my last question here, and then we'll have some time to take questions. But share some guiding principles, leadership guiding principles that have served you well in your career/life, and any advice you might have for folks moving kind of from being an individual contributor to more of a team approach and leader.
Yeah, I'll start, and I'll share another story from, just to break it up a little bit, from BB&T. I read this Testing Center of Excellence, and some of the values I've always grounded on are humility, integrity, and resiliency. And there was a lady who worked for me. She was a 25-year veteran. She knew everything about loan operations, and we were standing up this Testing Center of Excellence for our new branch automation platform. And she would inevitably, after we got our testing schedule, she would always call in sick like the first 2 or 3 days. I'm like, my mom worked in a cotton mill for 20 years on third shift, and she went to that job and ran that loom no matter what, or shipped me down the street 2 trails down to a cousin's house and went to work. Why can't this lady come to work? And I just didn't understand that. And it was my first time leading a team, and I was coming over from being an individual contributor, and I called up one of my cousins who had gone to East Carolina. She was living in Richmond. I was like, "Do you believe this lady? She calls in sick every time. She blows up my schedule. I can't hit my targets. I got to work people overtime." And she said, "Maurice, she has a family, and she's a working mom and female, So that experience taught me to develop empathy and compassion for other people, and to really understand when people come to work and they're not performing the way you think they should perform, or the way they normally perform, you probably need to pause and say, hey, is everything okay? How are things at home? And give people the room and provide coverage so they can, manage their mental health, manage, whatever's going on outside of work, and come back and thrive. So that was a really good learning experience for me. And then I appreciated the fact that Pam was just a good old Wilson lady, and she would tell you like it is. And she came in my office one day, closed the door, and she used every blankety blank word you would think of. And I was like, wow, I'm not gonna write you up, I'm not gonna fire you. I just appreciate that you had the courage to come in here and really just chunk me down on, being more compassionate, and it just helped me out more as a leader.
I had a few of those when I was growing up as well. But, sitting here and talking and listening, probably several of you guys are sitting out there in the audience going, so what does this have to do with transitioning from my dorm room to my boardroom? Well, you remember the second part of the title of this presentation, do what you need to do so you can do what you want to do. That's been one of the mantras I've lived by for a very long time. And what it means is, think about it in your student careers. Think about it this week. You probably have assignments, you may have tests, you may have exams, you may have papers. But you've also got this conference, you've got the football game coming up this weekend, you may have parties, you may have friends wanting to hang out. Did you do what you needed to do so you could go hang out with them? Did you do your work? That's what it means in transitioning from a dorm life to a professional life. Doing what you need to do. Doing the work. Taking care of your responsibilities. Why? Because you're going to want to do something. You may want to travel. You may want to own a Maserati. I've told my son I want a Shelby GT by the time I'm 50. But I also told him that's going to be his birthday present to me, so that's not on me, that's on him. But it's understanding that, as you're going into a professional world, that you have responsibilities, that you either assign them or you take them upon yourselves, but you need to get those done. Why? You may want to pay your bills. You may want to take a vacation. At some point in time, if you don't already have children, you may want to buy your children stuff. But you have to do what you need to do. And moving through my career and moving, from the dorm room, honestly, to boardrooms in a very short order, or their equivalent, it's been about taking that responsibility. It's been about understanding what was in front of me, what was going on, and being able to communicate it effectively. And to me, that was learning those things was doing what I needed to do. Because why? Well, I wanted my son to go to school. I wanted to have the needs of my family taken care of. I wanted to be able to see the world. And, luckily I was able to do it and get paid to do it. But that's what it means from going from just being a student to a professional, and understand I didn't stop just being a student. I'm still learning today, even though I've got a Ph.D. And I think we're still on time.
We're doing great. We're doing great. Thank you. What's cool, y'all might have caught this, but unfortunately, because of their schedules, neither of these gentlemen were at the keynote this morning. But those of you that were, hope you're catching the exact same themes coming through. Resiliency, do the grunt work, do the hard work, integrity, compassion, right? I mean, those were literally the things that our keynote speaker spoke about as being a leader this morning. So appreciate those experiences. We do have a few more minutes. I'd like to open up the floor if you all have any questions for either of these gentlemen. Liv? Does she need this? Okay.
did you guys transition from, okay, I'm an adult, or like a young student adult, to like, okay, I'm an adult now, like professionally and personally? Like, how did you make that transition?
Well, I mean, listen, you're in a really good environment right here in this College of Business, and I don't know what the mix of students who are in MIS. I assume that all of you are in MIS, but you're in a really good environment to get a really good foundation, right? And I tell my kids all the time, I got married kind of late, and I have an 11-year-old, a 9-year-old, and a 5-year-old, and I have like really legitimate conversations with them on discipline and being disciplined, right? And I tell my kids all the time, the way you live today, I started planning when I came out of MBA school. Like when my friends were going on all these exotic trips or going out of the country or buying these nice BMWs, I just kept putting my coins away, putting my acorns away. I knew I wanted to do something on the side at some point. So when I got the opportunity through discipline and planning, I was able to start a small real estate investment company in Charlotte that afforded me an opportunity to really begin to maneuver in ways and punch up market in ways with people that made a whole lot more money than me, because I understood the tax code, I understood real estate, and I knew how to shelter and move things around. So it was about planning and making those sacrifices and being disciplined. And then I kept being a student of the game that I'm in. I've been in banking for 25 years. When new things are coming out, I would, humble myself and go seek people out at conferences and figure out, okay, what are you doing? How are you doing it? And I wasn't trying to do exactly what they were doing, but I was just trying to take enough information to go back and become the best me that I could become, and not look to the left or to the right, but always focus on what I had ahead of me and what I wanted to accomplish. I would never get caught up in what someone else is doing, how successful they are. Just focus on being the best you can be for you and the person that you were created to be.
Great. Did I see another hand?
You did?
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
When working in international business, what is the biggest setback and how do you work through it?
Can you just repeat the question?
So her question was, when working in international business, I believe I heard you correctly when you said, what's the biggest setback and how do you get past it? Work through it. Okay. I'm going to start this out probably by the worst answer, but it's entirely applicable. It depends. It depends on the scenario. It depends on the country you're in. I'll tell you the biggest thing, if you're interested in working in international business, is learning the business culture of that country. Ironically, when I was sitting out in the presenters lounge, I'm not sure what you guys call it, I was talking with some other folks, and we were, I was telling them, some of the experiences when I was overseas. So, for instance, if you're interested in doing business in Asian cultures, before most traditional businesses will work with you, they want to get to know you as a person. So what does that mean? Well, you can expect to be going out to dinner or going out drinking with the executives of that organization the night before you're doing the business deal. And depending on how that goes is whether or not the business deal is going to go great or not. It's part of their culture. You will see, at times, if you're walking around Tokyo first thing in the morning, where people in full three-piece business suits are maybe passed out on the steps or in front of the door of a business. They actually have built in where you can go 7-Eleven and get a white shirt and a pencil tie the next morning, so you can have a clean shirt and tie for the next day if you haven't been home. That's the biggest thing. That's also the biggest setback or pitfalls that I've seen from folks, as well as not understanding that. To where, another thing with Asian cultures, they're very big on gifts. Understanding that. Or, if you're working in some place like, Europe, where certain times of the year, the entire country may go on vacation for a month. If you're working in Italy, understanding that coffee breaks are important, and they're going to take them whether or not you want them to. But there's a lot more wealth of information on how to navigate that for you guys versus, when I first graduated. So take the time to learn, take the time to get acquainted with the culture, because just because you're American, just because most of the world says I speak to Americans, if you can prove that not being accurate when you're introducing yourself or you're first starting working with somebody, it's going to take you quite a bit in your career. Go ahead.
I would do everything that Thomas told you to do, but I haven't worked out of the country or been an expat or anything, but I've worked with a lot of diverse people, right? I would just say be human and try to understand the culture and get to know people with your authentic self, not with the end in mind to do business, but just be your authentic self, understand who they are, and over time, you'll begin to have those successes that you're looking for.
Great. Any other? We might have one more time for one more. Yes, sir.
If we've got the time, I'll just bring things you guys both talked a little bit about empathy and compassion, specifically touched on those topics. As leaders, how do we tread the line between empathy and accountability? Holding your people accountable, getting connected.
I love that question because
Maurice, if you could state the question.
Yeah. So how do you draw the line between compassion and accountability, right? And I like to use this term, bold, empathetic leadership. And what I mean by that is bold means you're out there, you're caring, you're being human and empathetic, but you're also setting expectations and you're inspecting routinely what you expect, right? So you can be compassionate, you can be human, but in a lot of cases, for-profit companies aren't running a non-profit P&L. We're there to make money. We're there to hit our targets. We're there to, for the shareholders and to create value for the company. So you have to walk this journey with people and check them at different checkpoints. And at some point, to the point Thomas made earlier, you may have to part ways. No harm, no foul. But you can show compassion at the same time. And empathy to their situation, but you also have to say, well, hey, here's what we're accountable to achieving, here's what I need from you, and if you don't see that behavior and you don't see the action, then you have to start moving to what's called a performance improvement plan, and then you just either manage that person out or they'll self-select out. Or they'll course correct and turn around, right? But if you can see that they want to course correct and turn around, it's about getting them in the right situation where they can be successful. And maybe in some cases they're not moved out of the organization, they're just moved to a better fit. But it's not just the leader, it's also incumbent upon that person to manage his or her career and be able to articulate to the leader, this is what I want to do, help me get there.
So I was just going to add to that. For me, it's, can you still get the job done? Everybody is everybody's an individual. They all have their own circumstances, their own things going on. So Maurice shared earlier the story about a woman that worked for him that just on a regular basis couldn't come in certain days, but could she still get the job done? To me, that's the difference, or the delineating point between empathy and accountability. Is, okay, you can't meet the letter of the law in this situation, but you still meet the spirit of it. What can you do? Are you willing to say, I can't do something? That's very hard for a lot of young professionals to understand, is that in business it is perfectly acceptable to say, I cannot do something. Because what you're doing is not only admitting that, one, you may need more education, more training, something else, but two, you're identifying that you understand you don't want to set the organization up for failure. And being able to do that actually speaks a lot to the maturity of the individual, or at least the employee, from the folks I work with.
Thank you. I think we're out of time. So would you please join me in thanking Mr. Moody and